So before the video begins, I want to talk about how I became an Uncharted fan. Little kid me went to the store to pick up a PS3 and some games with my mom, probably for Christmas or my birthday, something like that. At the time, I didn't even know what games I was gonna get, probably like Madden and just something else that caught my eye. The PS3s at the store came bundled with games that I just really wasn't that familiar with. At the time, I was just a kid, I didn't really keep up with gaming news at all. Most new launches I was pretty unaware of and generally bought games that looked interesting on the store shelves, and that's why I decided to buy the PS3 bundle with a copy of Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. I figured I would give the game a try, and if I didn't like it, oh well, but the game did look interesting enough. Then when I got home and actually had the game case out, I flipped the case over and noticed the Naughty Dog logo on the back. At the time I was, and I still am, a big fan of Jak and Daxter, so seeing this logo actually got me excited to play the game. Yes, there was a time where a Naughty Dog logo on a game was actually a good thing. My, how times change. Go f*** yourself, Neil Druckmann. Well, I went ahead and popped the game in, and the rest was history. Really quickly guys, before the video begins, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that good shit. We're actually super close to being able to monetize the channel, so every little bit of support helps. Please also consider checking out my locals if you do wish to support my work further in the future. Again, anything helps. Let's go ahead and jump right back into the video. Now this was definitely a departure for Naughty Dog. As I discussed previously, they had done the Jak and Daxter series, which was cartoony and catered to a younger audience. Sure, it's a game for people of all ages, but its main demographic is definitely on the younger side. Uncharted was Naughty Dog's first real foray into a more real and mature adventure. They were not just trying to make kids games anymore. They wanted a game with wit. Yes, it still has some silliness and some jokes to it, but everything is more mature in nature. Now, the game is great, but it's definitely flawed and not without its warts, but it is definitely the start to what became an amazing series, and you could see the bones of greatness scattered throughout this entry. I want to eventually do a review of the entire series, so let me know if you want to see that. I would definitely say this game is probably aged the worst out of any game in the series, not just because it's the oldest, but again, there are visible flaws throughout the game that we will discuss. And to begin the discussion of Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, I think it's best to walk through the entire game chronologically and discuss it bit by bit. Yes, it goes without saying we'll be discussing the story, so of course there will be spoilers. The game came out in 2007, so if you don't know the story by now, 1, why are you watching this? And 2, you've had your chance. The game opens with a quote from Sir Francis Drake, who was an English privateer, basically a government-commissioned pirate, and he was the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe. The quote reads, "There must be a beginning of any great matter, but the continuing unto the end until it be thoroughly finished yields the true glory." It serves as a reminder that true glory comes from continuing to work on something until it is finished. You'll see this become a common theme throughout the series. The camera shows the coffin of Sir Francis Drake underwater and then transitions to the coffin on a boat being opened by the main character Nathan Drake, who is voiced by Nolan North. This was before I was sick of him voicing a character and everything. Now Nate is accompanied by a journalist named Elena Fisher, who is not only by herself with a strange man, but was drug out to sea by him lying to her. Yeah, her and her team clearly didn't do any due diligence. Let's leave the petite woman on a boat alone with a strange man in international waters. Nothing could go wrong there. Now the coffin is empty, and as Nate expected, his relative, Sir Francis Drake, faked his death, leaving behind a notebook that is surprisingly intact after being at the bottom of the ocean for a few hundred years. Quickly, events take a turn as Nate and Elena are attacked by pirates and forced into fighting back because Nate, of course, doesn't have any permits to be where they are. So they're committing a crime themselves just by being there. Again, Elena's team didn't really do any due diligence. It's funny how quick Elena just goes along with the idea of getting in a gunfight with pirates. This fight just serves as the combat and melee tutorial. Now you'll quickly realize that the gunplay in this game is just okay. Some people will say it's awful and then show videos of them just shooting wildly all over the place, and it's not really that bad, but there is some validity to their criticisms. But when they're shooting wildly, it's mostly just a skill issue. The fight with the pirates concludes with Nate and Elena being saved by Sully. Victor goddamn Sullivan. Sully is effectively Nate's father figure as well as his partner in crime. You quickly see that Nate and Sully are definitely scoundrels with some shady business dealings and womanizing tendencies. Sully is your textbook silver fox, cigar smoking, scotch swilling, chasing young women around the bars type. Nate has a little more complexity with his historical fascination, but again is a total scoundrel, seemingly a woman in every port kind of guy. The guys quickly prove their scoundrelness by ditching Elena at the dock.
Man only interested in the climax. He must be a real hit with the ladies.
Never had any complaints.
Crew, and I promise you that... Son of a bitch.
Again, not a great planner, Elena. This opening quickly sets the tone for what's to come. Despite how silly some of the aspects of the opening are, you quickly see that this game has wit as well as humor.
You go on out there and you tell her, we just found the lost city of gold. Maybe her producer can get it on the air tonight.
Oh, come on.
The next segment is Sully and Nate finding tombs through Francis Drake's clues. This is definitely the platforming tutorial, showing that Naughty Dog was still attached to their platforming roots like in Jak and Daxter. Now, the platforming in this game is definitely jank. There are many times that Nate just jumps to his death for no reason instead of jumping towards the ledge that you were aiming for. This is something that further entries in this series made so much better, and it's really rough in the first game. I recently played the first 3 games back to back to back, and it's a huge difference from game to game. Nate and Sully walk around and explore the tombs and have some witty banter. There's a good chunk of exploration and banter from Nate and Sully in this section, and it just shows the dynamics of their relationship together very well. Even though there's no action, Nate and Sully together is just a highlight. You see the first puzzle here, but it's not even really a puzzle because you just push the stone images in the order that they're written in your notebook. It gives you the answer, so you'd kind of have to try to get stuck here. There's also a sort of throwback set piece running section where Nate is running on a giant wooden platform as it collapses underneath and behind him. Again, it's Naughty Dog showing that they hadn't forgotten their roots. Nate and Sully find out that El Dorado is not a golden city, but a huge golden idol, which actually makes sense because El Dorado can mean the golden one or the golden man. It has various definitions along those lines. And of course, the statue isn't there and was taken by the Spanish. It wouldn't be this easy, of course. So naturally, the guys follow the tracks and almost immediately stumble upon a Nazi freaking U-boat on a waterfall that no one seemed to notice before. Like, what the fuck? How did it get here?
Must have come up the river during flood season and gotten stuck. Let's check it out, huh?
Yeah, wait. Something about this feels kind of hinky.
Hinky.
Nate, what kind of flood would have brought that U-boat halfway up a fucking waterfall? Again, some things in this game are better if you don't overthink them. So Nate gives the notebook to Sully and heads towards the U-boat to explore and see why it's there. On the U-boat, Nate finds the Nazi captain who was ripped to shreds, but does find more information about El Dorado, and yes, the Nazis were after the same treasure. Nate radios the information to Sully and leaves the U-boat, but not without accidentally arming a freaking torpedo. He swims back to shore to see Sully being held hostages by the villains of the game, Gabriel Roman and Navarro. Sully owes them a lot of money, and they obviously want to collect. This was foreshadowed earlier by Sully complaining about his debts. Now, Roman and Navarro want to collect the debt so bad that they shoot Sully, who seemingly dies. Pro tip, the dead usually aren't good at paying for things. They're only good for voting Democrat. Conveniently, the armed torpedo now explodes, allowing Nate to escape from Roman and Navarro. Nate then runs into Elena, who track the boys down, and they have a warm greeting. Elena sucker punches Nate for ditching her, which he deserved. Nate tells Elena that Sully's dead, and there's a clear moment where Elena has the hots for Nate. Can you blame her? Look at him. The story starts to slow down from here as Nate and Elena make their escape from Roman and Navarro's goons. You basically go through all the tombs again, killing bad guys to escape. You escape, take Sully's plane, which of course gets shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Nate and Elena get separated, and Nate gets knocked out and wakes up alone in the middle of the jungle. The next hour or so of the game is basically entirely combat. You go from area to area, which are all basically little linear combat arenas, and kill the same goons over and over again. There's definitely no shortage of combat in this section, and it's kind of a slog to get through, especially when you consider the combat's nothing special. Again, the people who say the combat is super awful are completely exaggerating, but it's not a highlight of what the game has to offer. This entire time, Nate is killing goons by himself because he's looking to find and save Elena. Nate being alone is also a low light of the game because there's not as much banter, not as many humorous quips. When it comes to the dialogue in this section, there's just a lot of dead air. The arenas themselves are interesting. There's a large tower that Nate scales and everything is visually appealing, but besides the next arena you arrive at, it's more of the same. Of course, when Nate does find Elena, he gets shot at by a guy with an RPG, which blows up the area that Nate is standing in. Side note, this is the worst cutscene transition in the game. It's comedically jarring and bad. And especially when you contrast it to the other extremely smooth cutscene transitions in the game. Nate wakes up in prison and meets another one of the villains of the game, a guy named Eddie Raja. Now, Eddie's a little goofier of a villain with a bigger personality than Roman and Navarro, who are much more stoic, so Eddie is easily more likable as a villain because him and Nate actually have back and forth rapport and banter. Elena rescues Nate by breaking him out of jail, and then you get to control a gun mounted on a friggin' Jeep. It's an on-rails turret section, but it's a badass and fun on-rails turret section. This ends with you being cornered by Eddie and then reversing the Jeep off of a broken bridge into the water and swimming away. Now it's time for another combat section. Much like the first time, you just keep killing goons and pushing forward until you get to the next cutscene. This is where Nate actually wants to leave and end this risky adventure because they're heavily outnumbered, but Elena actually wants to stay. Again, Elena is not the best planner. Either way, they have to head towards the harbor regardless of whether or not they're gonna leave, so they head that way. Now we get to the worst section of the game. Hands down, bar none, the absolute worst section of the game. The stupid ass jet ski section. I've had many times where I wanted to replay this game again and change my mind because I didn't want to play this section. I cannot stress enough how stupid this section is. I absolutely hate it. It's just the worst. The jet ski handling is terrible. I mean, it's just dreadful. Moving and shooting is basically impossible because of how bad the controls are, and for some reason, you now have an infinite ammo grenade launcher that you just pulled out of your asshole. You also need to shoot any barrel that you even have a possibility of coming into contact with, because if you even just sniff one of these barrels, it blows up regardless of difficulty. Now, the difficulty can determine if it instantly kills you or if you almost die. On normal, one barrel hit, and you'll basically have a bee's dick of health left. There is some normal combat between the jet ski parts, but it's nothing exciting. But then you finally get to another cutscene with Nate and Elena. Nate and Elena find out more clues and information about El Dorado. They also flirt, and Nate reveals the meaning of the ring he has from Sir Francis Drake, and also reveals how he knew that Drake faked his death. They leave with the intentions of getting a boat from the harbor. After another round of arena combat, Nate and Elena also separate so she can get more footage while he gets the boat. Then there's more combat, but Nate does get to the boat. But whoa, there's a plot twist. Elena has video proof that Sully is alive and working with Roman and Navarro. Now, Elena is a little untrustworthy towards Sully, and there's this tension about whether or not Sully is just a prisoner or a backstabber. Right after this, Elena loses the camera because she fell through a rickety bridge. Even though it clearly could have been saved, she could have tossed it or had Nate pull her up by the camera. Again, don't think about it too much. And now you get back on the jet ski because it was so fun the first time. This is where the game takes a creepier turn, where you find out that one of the goons was killed by a trap. Now, it's not just any trap, but a trap that was recently made out of your plane's broken pieces, so you know it has to be new. Then you find out that something has been eating the body and that you're being watched.
Do you think that...
Do you hear that?
There's more combat arenas, but they are more varied here because there's newer enemy types with laser-sighted guns that one-shot kill you if you don't spam dodge roll like you're playing Dark Souls. I'm exaggerating a little bit. You just roll now and then and don't stand still and you're fine. At least they are shaking up the combat a bit deep into the game so it doesn't get completely stagnant. You do rescue Sully, and of course he didn't betray you, and after some back and forth questioning, he reveals that he was forced to work with his captors to stay alive, but he's been misleading them all along, basically so Nate could save him. Also, Sully was saved by Sir Francis Drake's journal taking the bullet for him. I guess now we know why it was strong enough to last hundreds of years in the ocean, because it's so strong it's bulletproof. There's also another puzzle that's barely a puzzle. Just point the statues in the right direction and Bob's your uncle. Then Nate immediately leaves the group behind. Nate does eventually overhear a conversation between Roman, Navarro, and Eddie. Eddie gets fired and Roman and Navarro discuss Sully and their plans for finding El Dorado. You climb and fight a little more, come across another puzzle that really isn't a puzzle. You just go where you can, and Nate uses his thick booty to pull down these key symbols that open up the next path. This is where you find out that Sully, when trying to divert Roman and Navarro, accidentally sent them right to the treasure vault. After some more fighting, you rejoin the group and do another easy puzzle, just turning the symbols the right way, which gets Nate and Elena stuck together. This section is interesting because it's a section where you have to follow a path of Roman numerals 2, 5, and 7 while ignoring the other Roman numerals. There's a lot going on in this section, things to avoid like braziers, there's climbing, there's combat. It's just a section where there's a lot going for it, and it's extremely visually interesting. It combines most of the things that you've seen so far into the game into one section. You find Sir Francis Drake's corpse, who only got this far and then just died here. Now, before this section's over, there is a brief moment where you see some sort of thing, a creature, for a brief glimpse, but that's all you get. Then you carry on and fight Eddie's goons until you find Drake's corpse. Now, after finding Drake's corpse, this is where the game takes another drastic turn, where the earlier foreshadowing reveals that the creatures are actually zombies, and now you have to team up with Eddie to try to survive. There's still some banter here from Eddie, and again he shows why he's the best villain. This section is a huge narrative and gameplay shift, because earlier in the game, you'll have no idea that there's supernatural elements in the game. The game stays fairly grounded outside of the foreshadowing and then just takes a wild left turn. It's funny because after you see this, you'll realize, oh, the game's been telling me this the whole time. It's a great way to subvert your expectations and cause a complete tonal shift in the game. These zombies are lethal, and you're left completely exposed in a room with no cover, which you're not used to because the rest of the game basically forces you to take cover constantly. You feel very naked and afraid and out of your element experiencing this for the first time. Of course, Eddie gets absolutely undoubtedly wrecked by the zombies. You fight the zombies alone some more, and then you run and gun and escape with Elena. There's so much tension and anxiety here the first time you play this section, and it's one of the highlights of the entire game. The game continues its ridiculousness because now you're in a Nazi sub-base and the power's out and there's hordes of zombies that you have to deal with while trying to restore the power. It's close quarters, zero cover combat where the zombies seemingly come out of every nook and cranny. It's genuinely terrifying with the noises and the music adding to that intensity. While restoring the power, you find out that the El Dorado statue is actually cursed. Francis Drake found it, the Nazis found it, and it turns people into zombies. Anyone who opens it gets turned into a zombie. You also find out that Drake didn't die here, but he found the treasure and was actually trying to safeguard it, and all the zombies were actually the Spaniards that were a part of his crew. Then of course the Nazis found it and wanted to use it. Your typical Nazi bad guy trope, and it has some historical basis because the Nazis did actually try to track down treasures in real life. Elena gets captured by the villains and Nate has to fight his way out of the base, both fighting enemies with guns and zombies now. Nate eventually escapes the sub-base and meets up with Sully, and they set off to rescue Elena. After some more fighting, you do finally meet up with the villains again. Now, Roman and Navarro have both Elena and El Dorado. Now this is where there's a huge plot twist. Navarro convinces Roman to open the statue, where Roman becomes infected or cursed or whatever, breathing in the dusty statue aids, which turns Roman into a zombie. Yes, Navarro is the real mastermind betraying Roman. Navarro also immediately murks Gabriel Roman, just puts him down immediately. And this is where Navarro's intent is actually revealed. He doesn't care about the treasure. The curse is what he wants. He wants to have it to use it as a weapon. The weapon's actually more valuable to him than the gold. Navarro tries to escape in a helicopter with Elena as his hostage and the statue dangling below, which of course Nate jumps onto. One of Navarro's goons tries to shoot Nate from the helicopter, which distracts him, and Elena kicks him out of the helicopter, and of course, falling down to his death, he accidentally shoots out the pilot of the helicopter, causing the pilot to crash land on a ship. This is the final boss fight in the game, and it kind of sucks. It's really just not great. It has to be played in one specific way. You have to kill all of his guards while avoiding Navarro's laser-sighted shot because yes, it is a one-hit. And then when all of his guards are dead, he just runs away to another spot on the boat and you get to do it all over again several times. It's just a really annoying and not interesting final boss fight. It has basically zero redeeming qualities. The last part of the fight is even worse. You don't have a gun and you hide behind a box. You wait for Navarro to stop shooting and put his gun down, and then you run to the next box while he destroys your cover behind you. You can't play it any other way because he just insta-kills you. And then after all that, you just punch him in the fucking face. It just fucking sucks. After this, you go to rescue Elena from the burning helicopter without making sure Navarro is down for good, but no worries because he's standing in the exact 1 square foot area he needs to be in order for you to be safe, and he makes sure not to move until he gets dragged to his death. Hey, what a nice guy. Oh, and at the same time, El Dorado is dragged to the bottom of the ocean. Curse problem conveniently solved. Sully shows up on a boat, and that silver fox managed to snag some treasure for himself. The three of you leave together, and that's the game. Just like that, our adventure is over. Nate definitely deserves to relax on a beach with a drink in his hand after that. Now, the story is short. I played the entire game for the review, and all of my footage is only about 4.5 to 5 hours, so it really didn't take that long, but there's quite a bit packed into such a short time frame. I really enjoy this game and definitely look at it with rose-tinted glasses, but as we discussed throughout the game, it's not without its flaws. It's a product of its time. I mean, it came out in 2007 and its age definitely shows, but as I said, you can really tell that Naughty Dog had caught lightning in a bottle with this game. The characters and the banter really drive this game, despite so many things holding it back or at least not elevating it. As I said in the intro, I really want to do this for the entire series, so let me know if you guys want to see that. Subscribe, turn on post notifications, like, comment, check out my locals, all that stuff I said before, but as always guys, this has been your boy Drinker, and I am out of here. Peace.